Hey guys, so still giving you some background to this assignment that is coming up. I wanted to kind of give you an overview of some of the big world events that happened between like 1200 and 1500. So life changed a little slower back then on a global level, but this is the first time we really start talking about globalization because it's the first time there is proof there's a globe. So, so just as to put things in perspective, so picture yourself in the year 1200. Information travels at the speed of horse. Seriously, there's no faster way to get information really. You should have for signals of enemies coming, you should maybe have a series of smokestacks or something at the end of Lord of the Rings. So you can do things like that, but really communication doesn't travel much faster than humans do during that time. And so, life is a little bit slower on a global scale. The life is faster in terms of individuals. Most people, average age of death was 45, 50 for most of the world at that time. Most parents were having kids for the first time around age 14 or 15. So on a personal level, people didn't live as long. So every generation, if there's some big event, that's big. And there's no way to really communicate responses to major catastrophes. So in the 1200s, when Genghis Khan comes out of Mongolia, or what's now Mongolia, with his hordes, you find out maybe 2 or 3 days before the armies get to you that your city's going to have a war. And Genghis Khan's devastation has been unparalleled. I mean, just massive numbers of deaths all across Central Asia, all the way to Iran, that's made well over half the population in lots of areas killed. And then he set up this new system that allows easy movement from China to Eastern Europe or the Mediterranean for the first time in history. The Pax Mongolica, the Mongol peace, was the system. I mean, everyone's so terrified by the end of his reign, everyone was so terrified of the wrath of his armies that his armies could say, "Don't kill each other on this trade route," and people would obey. Which leads to, in the mid-1300s, the Black Death. So this bacteria or virus out of, I forgot which it was, I think it's a virus, they believe Eastern China, probably, maybe Mongolia, carried by rats. Now that those rats can travel with caravans, and this thing spreads across, and by the time it reaches Europe, which is where we have the most careful records of births and deaths, thanks to baptisms and funerals at churches, it's traceable and verifiable that about 1/3 of the population of Europe died in a period of about 10 to 20 years. So, and they had no idea what was causing it, because they didn't even know about bacteria or viruses or anything. They just knew there's a plague. And we have it bad with coronavirus, no doubt, but nothing like 33 to 35% death rate. And this thing just tapes it out. I mean, imagine you show up for your class at school at the beginning of the year, and you have 20 students, and by the end of the year, you're down to 13 or 12, and the others are buried outside. So imagine what that does to a culture when that happens. And then during this whole time, all this stuff is going on, and the Mongols try to ally with anyone. They don't care what religion you are as long as you obey them. But the armies of the Middle East that are under control of the different sultans, and they keep wanting, and have wanted since the 700s, to control Constantinople. And so 1300s, Europe takes this massive hit, and 1400s, the wars increase between Islamic armies and European armies, especially around Constantinople. Constantinople has become totally corrupt because its government is just, the term Byzantine today literally means of Byzantium, or the kingdom that was controlled by Constantinople. But if you use the word Byzantine as an adjective, it means impossible to understand, convoluted, mysterious, due to trickery and hidden rules. So that's what its government was like. And Byzantium had been fighting against some of the armies from the north in what's now Russia. And it was weakened there. It was weakened by constant battles with the Islamic armies. And in 1453, Constantinople falls. And it's renamed as Istanbul. And this sends a cultural shockwave through Europe that now there's no Eastern Empire and there's no Eastern Church. It's the end of Rome. So that's happening in Istanbul, what's now Turkey. To the north, Moscow had been part of the Byzantine Empire, and Moscow now sees itself as the last remnant of the true Christian church, because they'd already cut off. Remember, the Eastern Church and Western Church had divided because of issues of control of the church and issues of that was the big issue. Who's in charge of the church? So the East and West is already divided. Now Moscow sees itself as the only center of true Christianity, and it starts sending out both warriors and missionaries to fight off. Well, they had started before fighting off the Mongols, as the Mongols had gone up under Ivan the Terrible and others. Now they're trying to ally to the big call is to free the slaves that the conquering Muslim armies had taken over. So these Christian armies are trying to free Christian slaves from the Muslims, but these Christian and these Muslim armies, this has nothing to do with doctrine right now. This has to do with their identity, because they all act absolutely terribly in terms of how they attack each other, how they just rape and pillage and enslave, and so that's going on in the East. 1453 in the West, the cannons and gunpowder are used for the first time in battle in the history of the world. It's the end of the era of knights, which is a massive cultural issue due to this technology. Now remember, going back to the Crusades and the Mongols, there was increasing interconnection all across Europe to East Asia. And so the Europeans got gunpowder, which the Chinese had for a long time, and the Europeans militarized it. So it's not for just distracting explosions in Mulan style. They figured out, hey, if you put this in a tube with a projectile in front, you can send a projectile through a plate of armor. Which now means that anybody with this technology, even if they're not a noble, they can be the most powerful warrior on the field. Before this, in medieval battles, the knights had to have a lot of money. Just to have a knight, you have to have a couple people to take care of your horses. Almost never just one horse like in the movies. You usually had a couple, at least. You had to have people to take care of them. You had to have people to clean your armor. You had to have people get you dressed and resharpen your sword after every battle, because swords don't stay sharp when you're smacking iron all the time. So suddenly it's the end of nobility in a way. And the infrastructure where the wealthy people were the glorious heroic warriors, that's over. Because now anybody can take down a knight with a cannon or a smaller gun. And 1453, this guy named Gutenberg in Germany takes another idea that had come over from East Asia and China of a printing press, and like movable type in a press. The idea that they'd had presses before where you can carve something out, put ink on it, press it down on a piece of paper, and make books. But the idea that Gutenberg came up with and finessed was the movable type. So you have individual letters that are carved onto pieces of metal so they don't wear out, and you can arrange those, and then it lets you do lots and lots of books really fast. And this new technology is, and this all happened in 1453. Remember that year. So Constantinople falls, Moscow becomes the center. Gunpowder is used for the first time as a weapon to shoot things, and the printing press comes out. Now that's quite a bit of change for that period of time, and like for 1 year, anytime, when you think of how massively different our world would be if not for that year. So, and those events. So that's all's happening. Now remember, word about all these events goes slowly because it only can travel at the speed of humans still, or horses. Well, so as this word's spreading out and people are starting to see books for the first time and things like that, this guy gets a kind of a venture explorer idea. He gets funding to set off and try to find India and China, the source of all this knowledge and power and spices and gunpowder. He's going to find it by sailing to the west and go around the world. Now, Christopher Columbus is not a massively great navigator. His estimates of the size of the world were way off. He never realized that he had not reached India when he found these islands. But 1492, he starts making trips over and bringing back things from the New World, as they called it. And that also is the year when Spain's long battle against the North African armies, the Moors, who are the Muslim armies that had come in, they called it the Reconquista, the Reconquest. That war finally ends. Spain takes over the whole peninsula in the name of Christianity, and whereas like just the year 732, so 750 years earlier, the Muslim armies had come all the way through Spain into France and were within striking distance of taking over Europe I'm pretty sure it was 732. You can do a fact check on that. And now that's all pushed back, and things are set up for a massive war across in the Eastern Europe and across the Mediterranean between sort of Christian and sort of Muslim armies, with culture as the main. They're very different cultures, different religious allegiances, and that gets us. Yeah, that pretty much wraps up these major events that you have to understand to try to see the transitions that are happening and understand why the whole idea of knowledge and relationships started to change in the early 1500s.